This is just so unique in so many different ways. And like, what's obviously the most unique factor is that this is first and foremost a health crisis. I mean, we're having a pandemic and the world is having to deal with that. Countries were hit very hard in 2020, and we are seeing recoveries now. We're seeing rebounds. The concern, of course, is we're seeing very diverging recoveries. After the GFC also, there was a big hit to countries around the world, but the largest hits were to advanced economies because that was kind of where the crisis really hit hardest. But this time around, what's different is that it is emerging markets and low-income countries that are being hit much harder as compared to advanced economies. Another unique feature of this crisis is the very different speeds of recovery even within countries. Women have been harder hit, younger workers, low-skilled workers, and again, some sectors are coming back very fast, like manufacturing. Industrial production is recovering more than recovered in these last several months. But on the other hand, services activities, because people are not able to engage as freely in doing these kinds of personal services, that remains a harder hit. Now, what I will mention, though, is unlike after the GFC, this time around, the amount of policy support that was provided was really, kind of off the charts, very, very high. And that helped prevent, much worse outcomes.
Mm-hmm. And also the report says, and you also mentioned this in the press conference this morning, that China is already back to its pre-pandemic level, and US is achieving that this year, while other advanced economies are catching up next year, and emerging markets can only do so in 2023. Is there any calculation in terms of how or when global economy is going to bounce back to pre-COVID level? And is there any calculation on total loss of GDP output globally?
So in terms of the global economy as a whole, it will return to pre-pandemic levels this year, maybe I think the first half of this year. So, but again, it captures the fact that advanced economies and some emerging markets like China are rebounding much more strongly, while many others, it will take up until 2023. One number we have in terms of the cumulative loss in global income over 2020 to 2024, relative to what we would have had in the absence of the pandemic, is still at $18 trillion. So it's a very large number and big hit. But again, it's advanced economies that are managing to escape with fewer scars as compared to developing countries.
Mm-hmm. And a few days ago, when managing director was giving her curtain raiser speech, she said that we're at a turning point in history. We're both facing at promise and danger. Can you tell us more about what kind of promises we're looking at, what kind of danger we're looking at, because we've been mentioning a lot about long-term scarring and everything, and how the world is going to be different after this pandemic?
Right. I mean, in terms of promises, to start with, in the very near term, I think the promise comes from vaccines. We would be in a very different situation if we didn't have all the vaccines that we have right now. And I think that offers a promise that we will actually finally exit this pandemic if we can get sufficient people vaccinated fast enough. So I would say that's the near-term promise. The other promise, of course, is the whole countries will, build back better or build forward better, which is that they will have much more greener economies, more inclusive economies, that they will invest in climate mitigation, in digital infrastructure to raise the productivity of their population. And so that will be another large promise. In terms of the risks, of course, the big risks are, the dangers are about the fact that, we are seeing very divergent recoveries because many parts of the world are not going to get vaccines, into 2022, while there are several economies that will have widespread vaccinations by the summer. So there's very differential access to vaccines, the much more limited fiscal space in a large number of developing countries, the risks to financial conditions changing very quickly. I mean, all of those can, trigger much slower recoveries in many parts of the world. It can reverse the gains that have been made in reducing global poverty and also in the gains that were made in convergence of global income, developing countries converging to advanced economy income levels. So I think these are the dangers that we have to tackle head on.